All right, everyone should be able to see the slides. So one of the first things you want to do when you're thinking about beekeeping is find a great place for it. And even on a city lot, you can usually find yourself a really nice sunny place for your beehives. Some things to think about are how heavy all the beekeeping equipment is to start with. So make sure you have not only a sunny spot, but that it's easily accessible via a garden cart or a wheelbarrow or a nice, easy graded path so that you can get your stuff to and from where your hives are. You want to not put them right next to a creek because they do need protection from the damp. And if you have a really windy spot, you want to make sure that you consider how to weight the top down so the lids don't blow off, because just like us, bees don't do very well without a roof. South-facing entrances are great if you can make it happen. It's not a deal breaker though, because my bees face due north. It's the only spot that I have, so their porches face due north. And then morning sun is really nice. Electric fence. So some of you are probably wondering, why an electric fence? Well, this is why. So if you live even in a metropolitan area, oftentimes there are bears. And even one of my friends in a fancy neighborhood out in Woodinville with a gated community found her beehives knocked over one day because a bear climbed up over her fence and knocked her bees over. So this is my property at the cabin. Thankfully, I went over there a couple winters ago, right before a windstorm, because I had forgotten to put weights on the lids. And I was greeted with a garbage dump, thanks to the bear. But I was able to save those other two colonies and move them into a fenced area that had a better electric fence. Believe it or not, there's an electric fence around this. That darn bear went right through it and ate those two colonies. Another thing to do is to go ahead and look on the PSBA's website. There's some links in there that give information about the local regulations in each of the towns and municipalities around Seattle. So take a look, see, because the rules do differ from Federal Way to Burien to Seattle. So make sure that you are following the rules in your particular community. One really cool thing about neighbors is they're a lot friendlier when you give them honey. So do make sure that you ply your neighborhood with honey. Even my neighbors that didn't want to have bees next to them, as soon as they ate the honey, decided that maybe bees weren't so bad living next door. So there are two kinds of hives that are the most popular. The first is the Langstroth, which is the most popular hive type in the United States. If you think about hives, the hive is the wooden part that the bees live in, the house, and the colony is actually the bees. So we're talking about the hives here. And so the standard equipment is 10 frame, although 8 frame is becoming more and more popular. It's really a beekeeper choice. You pick which you would rather have and then stick with it, because obviously the dimensions are different. And then many people use all what's called mediums. And if you look closely on that picture, the 2 boxes on the top are called mediums, and the 2 bottom boxes, which you can see are deeper, are called deeps, and more on that later. And then just make sure that you decide what you want and go with it. And then if you decide later, I don't really like my box choices, box components really aren't that expensive, and you can go ahead and switch out and use something different. So it's not a deal breaker if you decide a year or 2 down the road that you'd like to do something different. And I want to put a plug in early for the PSBA backyard beekeeping classes that we're going to be having this spring, which I'll talk about after a few more slides. The other popular option is either top bar or something called a long Langstroth. And so both of those are horizontal hives. So if you don't like lifting stuff, a top bar or a long Langstroth might be a really nice option. Now those components aren't as readily available that are pre-built, although there are some websites where you can purchase kits and put the stuff together yourself. But online plans abound so that you can figure out what you want and then build your own. Then the other thing that is obviously very important to think about is which kind of bees do I want? The two most popular types of honeybees that are available are Italians and Carniolans. And obviously the Italians, per the name, originated from the area around Italy. And they're a nice light-colored honey-colored bee. The queens are easy to find in the box, although you don't need to always find the queen. They're easy to work with. They build up steadily in the summer, and they don't decrease their numbers much in the winter. So they do tend to use, if everybody could mute their phones, that'd be awesome. If you guys could figure out where the noise is coming from and mute that, that'd be helpful. But generally, they use more food over the winter than Carniolans do. And in my experience, Italian bees die out more often in the wintertime here than Carniolans do. The Carniolans are a darker race of bees. They're originated a little farther north than the Italian bees did in the Caucasus Mountains. So they do better in our cold, wet winters than Italians do. They tend to reduce themselves down to a very small cluster in the winter, so they don't use up as much food. They're very gentle as well. The catch with them is you do need to be really cognizant of their space needs, because in the springtime, the queen will lay a whole bunch of eggs and they'll outgrow their space. So it's important that you stay ahead and anticipate the needs that they have for egg laying. Otherwise, they will swarm. The Italians will swarm as well, but they're just, since they build up slower in the spring than the Carniolans do, then they do take a little bit longer to think about swarming. Other types of bees that are available locally are Russian bees and Sascatras. Sascatras is just a new breeding program that they endeavored upon up in Canada to produce a bee that is better able to overwinter in Canada in cold, wet climates. So they're also readily available. Russians, I really do not recommend for beginners and for folks that live in town, because they are more aggressive and they swarm a whole lot more. So I would personally stick with Italians, Carniolans, or Sascatras bees. All right, and then speaking of ordering bees, there are a couple ways that you can get those. So a package of bees is basically a box of bees where can you mute everyone except me, please? Kathy, can you mute your phone? All right, so a package of bees is basically 3 pounds of bees in a box that have been shaken out at a commercial beekeeper's lot from a whole bunch of different colonies. So it's a mix and match of bees that they've shaken out of colonies. They've measured them by weight into this screened box, and then they add a caged queen to that package. So those are very, they're not very, but they're more inexpensive than nucleus colonies or nukes. However, you get a whole lot less for your money, as you'll see in a sec. So the nukes are come in a 5-frame deep box, and that has all drawn frames. It has the bees. It has brood from the egg to bees that are just about ready to hatch. And it has an accepted laying queen, which is a huge advantage over having a caged queen in a box that the bees don't know, as comes in the packages. So they are slightly more expensive, and nukes now vary in cost. So when you order a nuke, you can spend, I've seen them for as little as $185 in town. up to $2.25 to $2.50 for local bees with local queens. And just make sure you read the fine print, because many of those nukes come with more bees than others. So generally, the higher the price, the more bees that you get in the box. And tonight we'll be introducing some of the PSBA vendors who have nucleus colonies and packages available this spring. But here's a super important thing. Order now, or at least by February, because suppliers are starting to run out already in their pre-orders. And so don't wait until April if you're planning on getting bees. Make sure that you pull the trigger and do that this month or next. All right, then we'll just briefly talk about the different hive components. And so what I recommend that you get to start with are, this is in a 10 frame example. So you'll need, starting at the top, that tin covered lid is called a telescoping cover. The next thing down is you'll want an inner cover. My humble recommendation is to have a notched inner cover, so that has a little entrance in it. Yep.
I think the slides haven't updated to match what you're talking about.
Oh, shoot. Okay, so let me know when you can see the hive component. I'll go back one and see if it'll unlock. Can you see it now?
I'm still seeing the ordering bees slide. Is everybody else on that?
Yeah, same slide.
Darn it. So
I've lost them altogether.
Kit, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. Kit, can you take over for a minute? And I'm going to reload this because it's stuck.
Yes. So what I can do is speak, kind of pick up where I would at 7 o'clock. Hopefully that works all right. The first thing I want to introduce is Puget Sound Beekeepers Association. For those of you who are here for the first meeting, welcome, and welcome to all of us, all of you. And let you know that Puget Sound Beekeepers Association is a nonprofit 501(c), which means essentially that all of our operations are volunteer driven, and we welcome involvement from people who'd like to join the board or participate in some way with some sort of trick you have that you know would be a valuable contribution. If you see something that you'd like to see improved, well, then we'd love to hear from you. But as the year goes on, we are planning virtual meetings, and we will hold those on the 4th Tuesday of every month. And the details that I can share about our beginner beekeeping classes, so that you have an idea of the dates, are the last weekend of February. Danny Najera is the professor at Green River College, who's has a PhD in entomology. And he is he's going to teach an afternoon class on Saturday as well as Sunday from noon till 4. We have a March class taught by Tracy Klein on the last weekend of March, the 27th and 28th, from 8 till 12 in the morning. And then our third class is being taught by Dawn Beck, and Dawn is a board member with PSBA, and she is she's a journeyman beekeeper, and her class will be on April 10th and 11th, again Saturday and Sunday, from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. All of these classes are posted, will be posted with signups tomorrow, so that you can set your chair aside for that virtual class. We are limiting class size to 20 students, so that so that everyone has the attention that they need. You know, in-person classes are much larger than that, but we felt like virtual class would kind of max out at that point. What else? You'll be able to get your apprentice beekeeping certificate after the class. We'll provide you with a test to take that and achieve that step if that's something that you'd like to do. $75 is the price for the class, and it also includes membership to PSBA. And if you are a member, then that's fine, then you pay $55. Anyway, that's important because it's spring and everyone needs a class if they want to get involved with bees. Tracy, are you ready yet? I want to introduce, I want to introduce my three, I'm sorry, the darn dog, there's no one to stop her from barking but me. The three vendors that we have that are partnering with us this spring to sell bees. We're going to start talking with them at 7 o'clock. They'll introduce themselves and tell you a bit about what it is that they're offering for sale. And then we can open up to questions and answers if people have inquiries for these guys. And if you would chat, type in your question to the chat so that we can manage the many people who may be curious. Okay, so that'll go on until 7:30, and then at 7:30 we have a presentation by Dr. Timothy Lawrence, and he is a professor at Washington State University, and he's going to do a recorded presentation toward a pollinator-friendly agro-ecosystem, which was presented originally at the WASPA conference, Washington State Beekeeping Association's conference this fall. So I think that'll be fun. It's a pretty quick moving, and it covers a lot of different topics. And sets us up for a great year of beekeeping, being that it's January. I want to wait till 7 to introduce. I'm doing alphabetical in order. Cascade, Natural Honey, Hive 5 Bees, and Rainy Day Bees. Tracy?
Hello.
Oh, there she is. I'll pass the baton.
All right, let's try this again. The new version of Microsoft Office sucks. Come on. Okay, are we back in business?
Yes, looks beautiful.
Woo! All right, so the 10 frame kits are where we were started with. So the top boxes that you see there, the two kind of shorter boxes, those are the mediums. Recommend 2 or 3 of those to use for your honey super. Or if you're using all mediums, go with 5 of those to start. And then you need 2 or 3, 2 deeps for your brood chamber, or 3 mediums. So if you do the math, if you're using 2 deeps for your brood chamber, you'll need, and 10 frame boxes, you'll need 20 frames. And then you'll need, if you're using 3 mediums, you'll need 30 frames. And then most folks here use a screened bottom board, although the picture has a solid bottom board there. Something also super important to get in the spring are robbing screens. You won't need those until the summer when the yellow jackets come out, but if this year is anything like last year on ordering equipment, the bee manufacturers got really far behind. So I'd recommend getting all your stuff up front. And then you need a feeder as well. And my humble opinion is the top feeders work the best. Frame feeders work fine, but you do need to open the box up, and so you'll have flying bees each time you open that up. Those little Boardman feeders, which are basically upside down mason jars that you slide into the front of the entrance, those are bad and promote robbing. And people that buy those only use them for the first year and get rid of them.
I don't believe we can see the slides. I cannot see the slides.
So can other people see the slides?
I'm seeing the standard Hive Components. page.
Yes, I can see
Same
that.
here.
Okay, good.
I can see it.
So you,
I
if you
can't see it at all. No,
So
it's
I'd
black.
refresh your Microsoft or your Teams.
Yeah, or if you disconnect and then rejoin, that can sometimes help.
Right. And so also you want to paint the outside of your frame or of your boxes, I'm sorry, and you'll want to use exterior latex paint. Oftentimes, if you go down to Home Depot or Lowe's right now, they'll have oops paint. You can use that. And using multiple colors is a good idea. So equipment to get for you, super important for new beekeepers to have at least a veil to keep the bees away from your face, a set of gloves to start with, either nitrile gloves or gauntleted leather gloves, and either the jacket style bee suit works great if you have a pair of thick blue jeans that they can't sting you through, or the full bee suit. Now, a couple of options on the bee suit. The most popular ones are the canvas ones. Those get so hot in July and August. They're just horrible. And the best time to work your bees is in the hottest part of the afternoon when they're all out foraging. And so there are a couple different kinds of vented suits. They are more expensive, but if you're prone to getting really hot, you might want to consider spending a little bit of extra money. Here's what I don't recommend if you're a beginner. This is our friend and colleague, Kathy Cox. Kathy's a master beekeeper. She's been keeping bees for a long, long time. I promised her I wouldn't tell anybody just how long anymore. And she works her bees in tank top, shorts, and flip-flops. And I've seen her accidentally drop a whole frame of bees right on her foot, and she just looks down and goes, damn, and keeps on going. So, but when you're new, that's not the way to go. All right, and then popular tools. I would say that a smoker is not just popular, but mandatory. It's probably arguably the most important piece of equipment that you can get. And so make sure that you get yourself a smoker, and then you want hive tools, obviously, as well. I look at these three tools as the two on the left go together, the scraping and cleaning tool and a frame lifter. If you use that scraper / cleaning tool, it is the most popular hive tool, but you pretty much have to have a frame lifter to go with it. Or you could skip the expense and don't buy a frame lifter at all and just get that J-hook tool on the right-hand side. You can pry the frames up and you don't need a frame lifter at all. And then a really cool thing is a stainless steel frame perch that has an obvious function that when you take one of the frames out, it'll actually hold 3 frames on there so that you can keep the frames there instead of setting them on the ground. And especially when you're new, you don't necessarily know if the queen is on your frame, so the ground is a really bad spot for that. And then a bee brush, you generally use that later on when you're removing the honey. So grab yourself one of those and use that later so you can brush the bees off the honey frames when you remove those. All right, and then as promised, do consider joining us for one of our online beekeeping classes this year. We'll have 3 separate ones, and those will be posted on the website soon. The first one is taught by Danny, who's a PhD entomologist up at Green River College. He's an excellent teacher, and his class is in February. My class is in March. If you're an early bird and like to have a morning class, that's a great option. And then Dawn Beck, who is working on her master's, and she'll be a master beekeeper by April during her class. So congratulations to Dawn on that anticipated promotion from journeyman to master beekeeper. And her class is on April 10th and 11th. Dawn's also an excellent teacher. And the classes are going to be this year $75, and that includes your 2021 PSBA membership. Now, as I mentioned, you should be able to sign up for those soon on the PSBA website. All right, and this one slide is for those of you who had bees last year and they're still alive. So congratulations, you've made it this far. Now don't let them starve. And so you do want to check once a month or so, especially now that they're going to start building up their populations. And just pick a warm-ish day in the afternoon, go out, and if you have one of those nifty FLIR cameras, you can tell exactly where your bees are. And this is a tale of 4 cities on the left-hand side. The 2 over on the far left, you can see the heat signatures. Those bees are up at the surface, and this was in February a couple of years ago. Those bees are out of food or almost out of food and definitely need feeding. The one on the right-hand side in the middle, sort of, you can see those bees, the cluster is spread out through the whole box, and they're probably going to need food as well. The box on the far right, you can see the bees are still way down on the bottom. And so they have honey throughout that upper box, and they didn't need any food. So one thing to keep in mind is that you also, in the wintertime, you only want to use dry food because you don't want to add extra moisture to your colonies. So the top right-hand picture is one of my colonies that I fed, and that's basically called mountain camp, where you toss a newspaper down and pour a bunch of sugar on top. The reason why in this one that the sugar's not all the way over across the shim is you see some comb sticking up there. They built comb this fall in that shim and filled it up with ivy honey, which is unusable in the winter, but they'll use it this spring when it warms up and they can rehydrate it. So the dry sugar works great, or you can use winter patties. The picture down on the bottom, you can see that little colony is clustered all up at the top, and I made winter patties. Winter patties are basically 95% sugar and 5% protein. So it's a light color, and you just need to make sure that you continue to feed them so that they don't starve out. Between now and March, before there's really very much food available, it's really important that you keep up with their nutritional needs so that you end up with a colony in the spring. All right, and that's it for now. And I don't know if you want to do Q&A now a little bit or just wait till the end. It's your call.
Well, it's 7 o'clock, but we did, I've covered, we can take a couple, 3 questions. Why don't we do that and then turn to the honey, because I did so much information during your 30 minutes.
Tracy, did you, on your newspaper that you put on there with the sugar, would you do cut holes in there or slit holes in the newspaper?
Nope, I just put one sheet of newspaper and then they eat right through it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you slit holes or poke holes in it, the dry sugar will pour through it.
Okay. And then what about what's the protein in the winter patty?
I just get the pollen sub. I buy it from one of the bee places.
Okay.
Because I make my own pollen patties in the spring and summer too. But for people that don't have a lot of colonies, like if you only have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 colonies, it's just as economic to buy the winter patties or to buy summer patties already made up, because you have to buy the pollen sub in bulk and it's messy and kind of a pain to make. So if you only have a few colonies, I recommend just buy it.
So my bees are all the way at the top, but they have those hives in that top box are just totally full of honey.
Yeah, if they still have lots of honey, then I'd check next month and see how they're doing. If they're in need of food next month, then consider feeding them then.
All right.
And I actually, in February, I start feeding pollen patties, regular summer pollen patties, the last part of February to get them building up anyway. So depending on the weather, sometime after Valentine's Day, I'll add regular pollen patties in. But once you do that, you really have to pay attention because they start building up and their energy needs go up along with the population. So you've got to feed them more often.
Go ahead.
Looking in the chat.
Yeah, I put the question in the chat. When you've got a couple of dead colonies, do you go right after pulling that hive apart, or can you wait a bit? I guess I'd be concerned about mold and stuff building up, but I don't really want to deal with all the frames and stuff. So,
Yeah.
Bill, deal with them or you'll have wax moth ruining all your comb. I answered you in the chat that you want to take those frames out and freeze them for 48 hours to kill all the wax moth larvae, and then store them in an airtight container and the ones that are moldy, you can just take them outside and use your garden hose. Test it carefully because again, it can blow the wax away if it's really on a high pressure. But you can just hose them off, and it'll clean all the mold, and then sit them out in the sun for a while to dry out, and then they're good to go again.
Yeah, I do that later in the spring. Right now, I don't worry about it because we're coming up on freezing temperatures anyway. So I don't worry about the wax moths till about March. And so what I did on one of my dead outs last week when it was cold and rather dry outside, I did take it all apart and just brushed all the dead bees out so that they didn't get moldy in there. I put it all back together, and it'll stay nice and dry if you have a moist quilt.
okay, and so you can wash them. You can wash them down with a hose with spray.
Yeah, I usually wait until it's a little bit warmer, but yeah, it works out great.
Yeah, wait till you got some good sun so that after you washed them, they get really well dried, or else they'll just mold up again.
Yeah.
Okay, well, and you're gonna. I'm gonna imagine I'm gonna have some partially filled frames, honey in the sides, and so forth. So are you blowing all that out, or you just?
No, if it's capped, you just take a garden hose and just like stick your thumb over it or put it on shower and just rinse out the fermented stuff. But you want to wait till it's warm this fall to do that, or this spring to do that, so that it has time to dry out.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
If you lose a colony and there's some honey stores in there, is there any reason not to take the frames out and put it in your freezer? Just wait for a few months?
You can do that. Sure,
Okay.
if you have freezer space.
Okay.
Okay, let's turn it over to our bee vendors, and we'll open it up for questions again at 8 o'clock. We always get to talk and kind of rolls on, and I think we miss each other. So, I mean, I know I do. So the three partners that we have this year that are information is available on PugetSoundBees.com so that you can reference the oh, I was going to turn it over to Jeff for a bit. Well, let me finish my thought. You can get direct information to these three vendors and reach out and communicate with them yourself. Of course, they would love that. So it's those links and the contact information is available on our website. So, okay, Jeff has a couple of important points. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Kit. So I just wanted to plug the neighborhood captains. I'll post the link into the chat so people can find them on the website. We have quite a few of them in different neighborhoods around the area. They're a great resource to reach out to. Don't feel like you have to wait for the monthly meeting to ask questions. Some neighborhood captains even get together to do their own little neighborhood meetings. So they're lots of fun. It's a great way to get to know your neighborhood beekeepers. So I'll post that in the chat. And if you are a journeyman looking to become a captain, we're always interested in more. So I'll post my email there so you can contact me. And then the other thing I was going to plug is the swarm list. So if you're a PSB member for 2021, you've got your membership paid and you've got experience picking up bee swarms, I'll post the link that you can fill out to complete that application. That's everything I had. Thanks, Kit. And all that's going to be in the chat.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that swarm list opportunity is typically only available at meetings in the first quarter of the year. So we're doing that again virtually. So access is only available through these meetings through a link that's available for those who are interested that have attended the meeting. So February and March meetings will repeat this process if you know people who you know want to get on the swarm list. Okay, so without further ado, Dave Schiefelbein, did I say that right?
That's pretty close, Dave Schiefelbein.
Schiefelbein, okay. Cascade Natural Honey, why don't you begin and introduce us and take it away.
Sure, thank you. And hello to everyone who's here tonight. I do represent Cascade Natural Honey. It's a local company headquartered in Bellevue. Carrie Theriault, many of you may know, especially if you're old-time people with Puget Sound Beekeepers. Carrie Theriault has been the face of the company for some time. I joined a number of years ago. Some of you might know me from my prior work with Ballard Bee Company and Urban Bee Company. But I'm off on my own now, and then I sell bees with Carrie. And the third member of our group is a youngster, TJ Main, who you've probably also seen. We're selling this year packages, Italians and New World Carniolans, and we're selling nukes, same two races, and we're also selling queens, taking orders on all of those now. Supplying the nukes and the packages beginning in April. Our first scheduled delivery date is around the 17th of April. Weather in California, of course, can change that, but that's what we're set for now. So we can help you out at the beginning of the season and then throughout the season because of the availability of queens that we have. I want to add one thing that I'm kind of excited about and just sort of add to the races that Tracy was talking about in her presentation. We are very hopeful that we will also be selling Caucasian packages this year. In the past, we've had Caucasian queens, but not packages. And I should know within a day or two if that's going to become a reality in the form of packages. It's an exciting bee. It's one that Steve Shepard has put a lot of time and effort in over at WSU, and we do hope to have them. I think I'm going to send out a specific announcement if we do add those to the scope of what we are offering. And if you want to get on the mailing list, just contact me in some way. The link that Kit mentioned on Puget Sound Beekeepers is a good way to do it. And I'll immediately put you on. And we don't spam people, but we do make a couple of announcements, particularly in the winter and spring. Just one of the things I want to mention about our company, between us, between TJ and myself and Carrie, we have a lot of experience in the safe moving and transportation of bees. We do source our bees from Northern California, and that's a 12-hour drive for us when you pick them up to when you get them to Seattle. And we put a lot of time and effort in the safe transport of bees, and for the past 3 years, we've not lost any colonies at all, either nukes or packages. And a lot of that has to do with the planning that we put into it, how we load our cargo, because the bees are cargo at that point, how we ventilate when we drive, the time of day that we leave California to come back up here, and then also how we unload once we're back up in Seattle. So we have a real good track record with that. A couple of seasons ago, we experimented with a plastic nuke box, which was brand new at that time. It's a great box for transportation. It's not the most durable box in the world. I think they have upgraded the plastic. last year we designed and built from recycled wood our own transportation nuke boxes, and those worked great for us. And we're going to be doing that same thing again this year. Our prices for nukes and packages are on the website, but I can tell you now, 5-frame nuke, $265. If you bring that nice box back that I was talking about, you get 20 bucks back. Our package prices for both races and hopefully Caucasians is $180, and you get a refund on the core box as well. I think that's all I have, Kit, until people have specific questions for me.
Okay, that's great. I have some of those boxes to give back to someone sometime, right? It's like, they're sitting in my garage. Okay, thank you very much, Dave. So we're on to Hive 5 bees now. And is it Kevin that is speaking?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, wonderful.
I've never used this platform before. This is quite exciting. Personal growth. No, if you want me to just go ahead. Uh-oh, now I can't hear you. Can you hear me still?
Yep, you're on. Go ahead. Yeah.
Kevin Mills down in Rochester, Washington, and most people ask where in the world that is, and I question that sometimes myself living here. We're actually right by Great Wolf Lodge, exit 88 off of I-5. We're about 3 miles off the interstate. And we specialize, actually, I've done commercial beekeeping for years, started up in Canada, was out of it for a few years, and then I accidentally got back into it here. And our first year, actually, we got into selling nukes, and that's kind of what we specialize in. Our nukes are, we make them after we bring our bees back from California, the almonds, which they're down at currently. We make up a bunch of nukes actually down in the Portland area. And we use 2 queen breeders, Z's Bees out of the Orland, California area. Really great guy, great family. And the Kona Queen Company, Kona, Hawaii, which just has a solid reputation. They have absolutely great queens. The interestingly enough, over the last few years, the biggest concern that we have from customers, and I kind of say this with pride, is they're usually really shocked at how fast the nukes grow. And so we have had several customers actually have swarming issues just because they didn't realize, you've got a good queen, you've got a good, I mean, we make sure there's at least 3 frames of solid brood in there, mostly capped, so that nuke can double in size really quickly. But anyways, no, it just kind of whatever questions people might have about them. The one thing I did notice when the vendor list was sent out, and it's my own fault, is I know under warranty it said none, and that's because we don't, I've never written a warranty per se, and I probably really should do that, but I don't think you'd really find anybody that we've done business with that isn't happy doing business with us. We've got a few reviews on Facebook, and we've got 5 stars, but like I said, there's, I don't know how many there is there, but we want to make sure. I mean, I love bees. I've loved them from the very beginning, as far back as I can remember. And one thing that we really aim to do too is to partner alongside whoever buys bees from us. It's kind of a partnership. They're buying bees from us, but we really want to walk alongside them. We started a YouTube channel. We put out a video at least once a week, and now we've got about 2 years worth of videos on active management and things of your bees. So I just want to ensure that if we do earn anybody's business, we'll make sure that you feel taken care of. And I can say with pretty good confidence, people who've bought bees from us in the past certainly feel that way about us. And so, and thank you again for allowing me to talk about myself and my bees.
Well, that's great. You gave us good flavor. Okay, so let's move on to Peter and Mary Beth. Rainy Day Bees. Peter Nolte is their last name. So we'll turn over the mic to you guys. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kit.
Hello.
As Kit said, I'm Peter. This is my wife, Amy Beth. Everyone makes that mistake.
I get it all the time.
Everyone makes that mistake. Anyway, yeah, so we are Rainy Day Bees. I started out putting hives in people's backyards, doing the urban beekeeping thing that a lot of you are also starting out doing right now. I grew that. I started putting hives on the roof of my work in Fremont, decided, hey, I'm going to go full time. And in 2016, I was like, okay, I'm going to take the plunge. I'm full time. I drove down to California to pick up Nucleus hives from Randy Oliver, who writes scientificbeekeeping.com. The next year, my friend Brad Jones called me. He's a former president of the Puget Sound Beekeepers Association. He said, Peter, I loved those bees that you picked up in California last year. I'm thinking about going down himself to get some too. I said, cool, I'll drive down with you. I could
The
use
great
a
thing
few
is
more.
I then only had to drive the first year.
She only did 1 year.
So I get out of driving now because they go down together.
So we went down, we picked up another 80 nukes. I think I kept 30, he kept 50. And then in the years since then, we were like, okay, yeah, we really like these bees. They do well up here. We've gone down, we've started selling them to members of the Puget Sound Beekeepers Association, and as well as online, other beekeepers that we know, stuff like that. Things, so yeah, it's Randy Oliver and Eric Oliver, who is Randy's son, are our main contacts there. Our nuke pickup is usually sometime in the mid-April to late April range. The Oliver's apiary is in the foothills of the Sierra Mountains. Which is one of the things I really like about them. They get weather. They're in Northern California. They get rain, they get some colder temperatures. They get, all the, it's California, but it's, more along the lines of what we see up here than you would get in Southern California or Hawaii. One of the trade-offs with that is if it's a cold spring, sometimes that means, or a very wet spring in California, sometimes that means that, the Olivers aren't going to be able to mate the queens quite as early as someone in Southern California or Hawaii, where you can, mate year round.
They're so lucky.
I love the Oliver's hives. They select for productivity, they select for mite resistance, and they select for gentleness. They do not select for race. I get people asking me what race the bees are. They're going to come in this is a quote from their website, all the colors of the rainbow. Some of them are going to build up like Italians. Some of them are going to build up like Carniolans. Some of them are going to build up somewhere in the middle. I've seen all of it from them. They're all great bees. I've been happy with them. Another thing I really like about them is that they do come out very, very strong. As Kevin was talking about with his nukes, 3 full capped frames of brood, usually a frame of honey, and that brood is about ready to come out and explode. It's going to double. It's going to get a whole lot larger. You'd better have another box for them, and preferably 2 more boxes for them, because they are going to grow quickly. Usually.
And that's why we have done nukes, is because we've wanted that growth where we have a chance at a honey harvest our first year. That's just why we've gotten them for ourselves. So that's why. So packages are great for a lot of different reasons. We've liked the guarantee a little bit.
Right, yeah.
The better chance.
I forgot to say, I do only do nukes. I do not do packages. Another thing that I think is really important about the Oliver's nukes is that the nuke that you're purchasing is actually the nuke that raised this queen. They do their grafting, they get the queen cell, they put it in the nuke, queen emerges in the nuke, goes off, mates, comes back, starts laying. That's the nuke that you're actually buying. They are her bees for all intents and purposes. They've raised her themselves, and she's been laying in there. It's tested. The Olivers also don't use synthetic miticides. That does not mean they don't use any miticides. They do use natural treatments such as oxalic acid, formic acid, essential oils, those sorts of things. On the mite subject, I'm going to say this with a bit of a caveat, and always take anything about mites with a grain of salt. When I was down there picking up the bees from Eric in 2020, so last year, he told me that all of the queens, all that they were raising these new queens off of, came from hives that did not require any mite treatments in 2019. That does not mean that these bees do not require treatments. They do, especially if you're in Seattle. You're going to get mite bombed by your neighbors.
We're all in one big apiary.
But I say that to say that, you know, there does seem to be some sort of mite resistance slowly building up. I think those are my main points that I wanted to hit.
The other thing, we do a lot of education as well. Peter writes a novel about once a month that he sends out to all of our nuke purchasers of here's what I'm doing in the hive this month. And he spends too much time responding to emails when you all have questions. So it's good, but just we're here and we pick up in West Seattle, and then our brand new shop in Shoreline that we are currently remodeling. So we moved, so we have a space for the bees. A quick just note too, we also are looking to hire one more part-time beekeeper that has 2 or more years of experience. So just contact us if that's a thing that you are interested in. It's a very part-time urban beekeeping thing. Can we drop our link in the chat? Is that a...
Kit.
Okay.
Is it okay to put the ordering link in chat?
Yeah,
cool.
That would be fine. That's a good idea. So there's, Anna, do you want to take the chat? There's a couple questions. We just have a few more minutes. You guys filled that 30 minutes pretty well.
I'm not seeing any further questions regarding the bee vendors.
Okay.
Did anybody have any questions up until this point that were not answered?
Here's Jose. Peter, are you guys selling the deeps or mediums?
Great. Hey, yeah, the Oliver's nukes are all deeps. Last year I had some mediums from my own operation that I was selling. I'm not selling any of my own bees this year.
We will have queens, but not our own nukes this year.
I should have my own bees again in 2022.
Same here, Jose, with Cascade Natural Honey, all deeps.
Thank you.
And I'll post instructions this spring on my Seattle Honeybees Facebook page so that people can know how to convert the deeps to mediums if you want to run all mediums. That's no problem.
Yeah, we run deeps on the bottoms because of the nukes, and then mediums on the top.
Peter, did you say how much your nukes were?
Sorry, I didn't. Our nukes are $240.
I have a question, new beekeeper. I was advised to start out with 2 colonies. Would that mean 2 nukes?
I can take that if no one else wants to.
Sure, Peter.
So yeah, you can absolutely start with 2 nukes. You can. I've had people buy from me and say, "Hey, I want to try one of your hives, one of your nukes, but you know the price point on the package is also really nice. So is it a problem if I get 1 nuke and 1 package?" And I'm like, "No, that's not a problem at all. The nuke's going to grow up faster than your package. The package is going to be about a month behind the nuke in development, just because the nuke's got brood in all stages of development, whereas the package is starting with, especially if you're a new beekeeper, you know, no comb even. So the queen can start laying maybe 3 days to a week after she's released from her cage. So the nuke's going to be further ahead. The package is going to be a little bit further behind. That can actually be really nice for your first year as you're kind of getting the hang of everything. I do recommend, and I think pretty much everyone on here would agree that starting with 2 hives is the best choice. I was a little cash strapped when I started beekeeping, so I just started with 1. The middle of that year, I started with I think it was a 3-pound package. It might have been a 4-pound package. But by July of that first year, I split that hive into 2. So I did go into the winter with 2 hives, which is the important part. But that's a little more advanced. That scares some people. And you do need to manage the hive pretty aggressively for growth if you want to take 1 and split it so that you have 2 hives that are strong enough to go into winter. My thoughts.
Thank you.
Would Dave and Kevin, would you like to put your email link there in the chat? Just type it in on the chat bar as well as Peter did, just so that people can follow that along. And
make it easy to find all of us.
I also see the chat. Yeah, it's at the website, but if it's right here and somebody wants to follow up, because we're about to close out here. And I also see at the top of the chat that opportunity to sign up for the swarm list. And I've had some members reach out to me to make sure that was happening. So again, that'll show up twice more. Yes, Todd?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if it was mentioned that there are a couple of other species like the Sascatras out of Canada. Is anybody selling those? And then my other question is not for Peter, but for the other 2 vendors, where are the pickup locations for things like packages? Is it Bellevue, and I forget where the other location was.
Yeah, I'll jump in. This is Dave. Thank you, Todd. Our pickup location is Bellevue, Bridal Trails neighborhood in Bellevue. It'll be on a Sunday, and so that's the pickup location. The little bit I know about the Sascatras bees, I don't believe anyone is selling them locally. Man Lake sells packages. Just be careful about shipping through the mail. Could work, maybe doesn't. I've never tried it before. And those are coming from Alavera's bees in Northern California. And they're actually a little different. They're not straight Sascatras. They're a Sascatras hybrid. And I think people generally know them as Sascatras, but they are supposed to be a good bee. I'm kind of curious about them myself.
Todd, the other thing that you can do is get bees, and then you can replace the queen later in the summer by buying just the Sascatras queen. That's another way you can go.
Oh, okay. All right.
They're just tough to find right now, unfortunately. I do think they're going to become more available. The queens are more expensive, but I think that's a supply and demand thing.
Yeah, and honestly, Kathy and I did an experiment 2 summers ago and bought a bunch of Sascatras queens, and I have none of mine left, and I think Kathy has none of hers left either. So we didn't have a lot of great success with those.
Did you get those out of California?
I did.
I still got it, Tracy. I've got 1.
That reminds me. Oh, sorry. Never mind. I can't tell if I'm speaking or somebody else is. Sorry, but is there an advantage to getting different species, or is there an advantage to keeping with one species of bee? Like, say, if you have a bunch of different hives.
So they're technically all the same species. They're different races. And in my humble opinion, the Carniolan, they're all mutts, honestly. But the ones that have more Carniolan genes, the darker bees, tend to work in colder, wetter weather and overwinter a whole lot better in our wet, long warmish winters than the Italians do. The Italians don't tend to last through the winters as well as the Carniolans do. Caucasians do pretty well too.
I think that new beekeepers need to understand is that when your queen goes out, she's going to mate with 6 to 20 drones. You don't have any control over that unless you're doing artificial insemination. So you really are just getting mutts. And if you've got a bad queen, she's pissy or she's not laying right, you can always kill the queen and they'll make a new one and you'll get something different the next time.
Yeah.
Question for Tracy. Do you have any thoughts about why the Sascatras queens failed to produce new queens?
Well, no, because honestly, they're supposed to do really well in our environment. And I have a chat group with a bunch of people that I took my master beekeepers with, and some of them back east said that their queens are, their Sascatras bees do really well, and others said had the same experience as me. So honestly, I don't know. They should have done really well here, and they just went.
So Sascatras, is that like Saskatchewan and Alcatraz?
Yeah.
Or what's the...
So if you're interested, it's a really good read. Go to the Sascatras Bee Project website. And they talk about how they selected for these bees up in Canada, because obviously Canada is cold up in, the northern climes. And rather than start over every spring with packages, they wanted to build a bee that was winter resistant, that was a good honey producer, and had Varroa hygienic properties. And so what they did was they collected bees from a bunch of different places in Canada and created this breeding program and came up with this line of bees that they have called Sascatras. And so they're mostly Carniolan genetics, but not all. As Kathy mentioned, they're mutts, but they've selected for these criteria. And what they did was, because you can't import bees between Canada and the US, they got special USDA permission to send bees down to 2 places, lap bees in Ohio and Olivera's bees in California. And then what they did was they crossed those bees, the Sascatras bees, with VSH, or Varroa sensitive hygienic bees, out of the Baton Rouge Bee Lab to try to boost their Varroa sensitive properties. And those are the bees that Olivera's and lap bees have. And they're the only 2 queen breeders in the country that have those true Sascatras VSH lines.
Did you know that was a question that was going to get asked, or how did you do that?
I did my research paper in my master beekeepers on breeding a better queen, and that was part of it.
Wow, bravo. Okay, yeah. With that, let's save the rest of our questions. Sorry, Tracy, what were you saying? No, you're done.
Hey, go ahead.
If I just make mention real quick, I bought a handful of Sascatras about 2 years ago. I think it was 50 or 75 of them. And they did excellent, absolutely great. The fellow who developed them is in Saskatchewan, where I did my commercial beekeeping before, was up in Manitoba, right next door. Great track record. The guy is awesome in his breed. The issues that we run into is not necessarily the type of honeybee that you have. 90% of the issue of bee survival in our area or anywhere else is successful Varroa control. And that's really, you just have to be totally obsessive about Varroa control.
Amen.
Yeah, and then Todd, just real quick answer to your question, as far as, the different types of bees and what they're good for, it kind of depends on your business model and what you're trying to achieve. We run mostly Carniolan, but some Italians, and the Italians kind of serve their purpose for the business model, Carniolans for the other part of it. But it's fascinating. Russian honeybees is something really worth studying. A colleague of mine, Stephen Coy, anyways, he just came out with a book on Russian honeybees, and that's a really interesting race to study.
Kevin, I just want to mention, I'm actually I got started on this because I want to do an eco restoration through bees, and I heard about a guy named Dr. Leo Sharaskin out of Missouri, and his whole thing is about doing horizontal hives, and a lot of his research is right out of the whole evolution of bees in Russia.
Nice.
And that whole, so anyway, yeah, there's a great link there.
It's a fascinating read. I'll throw the book here. I'll find it on my desk and throw it in the chat here. Quick.
Super.
If you're a beginner, though, please don't get Russian bees.
Okay, so we have, I'm seeing several people join the meeting because they're expecting to see the beginning of our presentation. So with that, I would like to introduce, so I hope that the volume quality, Jeff is going to look evil at me. The volume quality on this video is as good as it should be. It was a little bit warbly in spots, but as I said, there's a lot of great fast-paced information. Questions about what's going on in the hives or whatever you like.
I had a question. I'm not sure if I'm.
Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, far away.
Yeah, I ordered I don't know, about 20 or so packets of wild seeds from Psba last year, and it was really great. I wound up giving away to my neighbors and people that were walking by on the street. I'm just kind of curious, if that's sort of like a program that you're trying to push, like in terms of like getting people to distribute seeds in their neighborhoods to, get people more aware of like what would be good for pollinators and to provide, food and that sort of thing. Like, I'm just trying to figure out like what we can do at a local level where we live, here in Seattle, in my case.
I guess I'll take that question. Yes, we have seeds again this year for the 4th or 5th time, and distribution will be upon request. There's a resources place to request seeds on the website, and we did commit to doing another batch because they're very popular, and it's a good way to be active when we're all so distanced, and it really does make a difference for the pollinators. I did think of bringing that up before you're asking, so I'm glad you did present that question. Thank you.
Hey Todd, this is Dave Schiefelbein from Cascade Natural Honey. I really like your input about passing the flowers out to the neighbors. It's like when we can witness to the people closest to us, it has a huge impact. And I speak from experience on that. I live in West Seattle. I happen to live on a corner, so it's a visible lot. But the first thing I did when I moved into this house was dig up all the grass and plant raised beds. And a lot of it's vegetable garden, but every single plant that I plant is a pollinator-friendly plant. And I can tell you, people notice. You meet your neighbors if you're doing something different than if you're visible about it.
Brad, do you have your hand up? You're on mute.
I did have a question for Tim, but then he disappeared. But I can pose it to you guys. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brad Jones, Ceola Bee Company, West Seattle guy, and been doing it out here for about, I guess, 11 years, my 12th year now. But yeah, it was more along. He made a curious comment about regulation versus education, and so I'm just kind of I want to kind of throw it out to the group because at least, and Peter mentioned to me earlier today that this might be a presentation I'd be interested in because it is something that he and I have discussed at length for, I don't know, countless hours at this point, huh, Peter? too many drives to California and all that. But so my point or my question is, okay, so if people are kind of locked into their ideas on how to handle this stuff, which probably plays into other aspects of, providing food for bees and all of that as well. But, how do we get people to do the right thing when they may not necessarily want to? That requires a stick, i.e. the regulation. And I think my feeling is we're gonna have to do those in conjunction. We're gonna have to, mandate some things for people to do in order to make this happen while we educate people on it. And, the example that comes to mind for me is, like from the governmental level, I went to college out in North Dakota, did a lot of bird hunting, and we would get to legally hunt on private land that were farmers because they had what they called CRP, which is referenced by Tim in his slideshow, which is just conservation land meant as habitat for wildlife. And this is kind of the same concept that, of farmers planting strips of land that are just pollinator plants. So, I mean, that's just my general comment. I'm just kind of curious, especially about some of the more experienced beekeepers who might be connected at a state level or even connected at a national level with people who might be affiliated with universities or, the EPA or the USDA or what have you. So with that, I'll yield the floor.
Thank you, Brad. Does anybody else have any questions or comments they want to add about the video or anything in general?
Well, based on what Brad just said, my question, I'm new to this, right? Like I don't even have any bees yet, but is PSBA doing any sort of lobbying efforts? Is there anything that we should be following or supporting?
A couple of years ago, there was a group of us that went to Olympia because there were a couple of very valid bills being considered on the floor. And we dressed up as bees and we set up a table out in front of the Capitol and gave away honey tastings, and the people who were on the in the committees that were reviewing to push the legislation along. We actually went to those offices. It was really cool. It was really fun. And we carpooled, imagine that. And anyway, when those things come up, there is a circle of work that's being done, not just with PSBA, but among the beekeeping community in general. Steve Hyatt, who is a commercial beekeeper in Eastern Washington, who has spoken to PSBA a couple of times. He's on the he kind of is the head of the lobbying efforts that and he keeps us abreast. And if something like that happens along again, it would be great to go down and represent. One of the bills was to turn beekeeping into a farming as a crop, right? So that there were benefits to beekeepers that weren't being allowed to them because bees weren't being provided as a crop. So they changed the definition of it, and it benefited beekeepers a lot. Anyway, yes, there is stuff that goes on. But as far as pollinator plants, that's a wonderful, a little bit indirect, but not really, right? It's something that should probably be presented.
Kit, I feel like I have to maybe slightly correct you a little bit.
Thank you.
Puget Sound Beekeepers is a charitable nonprofit not engaged in political activities. It's sort of our IRS role, so we have to be careful what we're saying. But yeah, I mean, we can communicate any bills that come up to members and share that. But the effort you're referring to that Tim Hyatt led through the state beekeeping organization is they were responsible for that, and we helped promote it. But we didn't really give it an opinion either way. We just let our members know. So that's how we don't get in trouble. But
you let us know about the beekeeping liability bill, which was great, to get to know that. And then we went out and told everyone to comment on it.
yeah, and everyone got together and they put bee costumes on and went to Olympia. So
Exactly.
yeah, so as an
But
organization, we
not
just have
a
to
Puget
remember the
Sound
IRS
Beekeepers
rules there.
Association of
Exactly. If I could interject, because Todd, this has to do with your question, and the one place that I know of where we can have an impact on large amounts of planting of pollinator-friendly plants. I had the opportunity this last fall to help Sound Transit with hive removal that was in a tree.
Which the video's on our Instagram.
The
Rainy
video's
Day
on our
Bees,
Instagram if you
it's
want to
cool.
see it.
Peter
It is
got to
fun.
go up in a big lift.
But yeah, during that removal, the head of, or the two guys that were in charge of like all of the replantings for all of these Sound Transit mitigation for all that, the entire Sound Transit line, all of the replantings for all of that, said that they were really interested in hearing about what we thought should be included in those replantings for pollinators. So that is a massive stretch, obviously, that they are very open. They have money and they want to hear what's good for pollinators. I kind of dropped the ball on following up with them. I need to do that again.
You've been trying to get in contact with them again, but it was really exciting because it's like, that's a thing we can.
I lost their direct contact information, so I'm trying to find their contact info again.
But we can tell lots of people the farmers market, like, so for us at Shoreline Farmers Market, they actually gave us a separate booth where we had an observation hive, and then we tell people about how to planting pollinator friendly plants. And I know PSBA would do that back when we had events that telling people, and it's like, we can do those things, and those individual things are important, but nothing would have the impact of actually influencing these larger plantings.
And as I said, we know that they are interested in hearing from us as beekeepers. So I need to follow up with them, figure out how, and have that conversation with them. And I've talked with a few other people in PSBA about their thoughts and recommendations, but maybe we'll have a big beekeeper get together brainstorming session.
And at some point we can share about, we're actually rehabbing half an acre in Shoreline that was sort of ivy on a cliff we're working with a restoration company and moving that into all native pollinator friendly plants. So we have like 18 flats of seeds from Northwest Meadowscapes growing in our greenhouse right now, and are seeing what we can do. Now we are doing it in a way that's much more beneficial for native pollinators than it is
for honeybees specifically, though we're planting a lot of plants that are hybrids and will work for both.
But at the Washington State Beekeepers Association, there was sharing around a study they had done of like a few different fields of different wildflowers, and the honeybees go to the least biodiverse fields, while the native bees go to the most biodiverse. So it's like we're doing this, it'll be some forage for our bees, which is great, but it's also a lot more for native bees. And we're big fans, I never say it right, the Xerces Society and all the work they're doing, especially with hedgerows. So if anyone's interested, we just attended another one of their webinars, and their work is phenomenal.
Well, let's definitely stay in touch. I wonder if there's a subgroup that would love to, like what you were talking about, and Brad and me. I think that,
You've got my email, Todd. We talked earlier today, so
you can find me, Todd, somewhere.
We'll figure something out.
Okay.
If you get hold of Peter, we'll be in touch, I promise. But one thing I might just also say on that subject is that, in this modern day right now, I think it's very important that our leaders, locally as well as at the state level and national level, hear us. And so it's also a good idea to talk to your district or your representative in the cities that you live in and what have you. I think that's all. Just a squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And if we squeak loud enough, they'll start paying attention. And it's just kind of the nature of politics and policy. It eventually becomes policy. I happen to know one of the Seattle City Council members personally, and I also have a friend who works for Seattle City Light in habitat restoration, and that's what he's currently doing right now. That's what Peter was describing. He's literally working with dams to restore native plants to places that have been clear cut and now overrun with invasive species of the sort. But in order to get people, first of all, to think about it, you got to yell at them, and then if you yell at them long enough and they decide to take some action, then they'll find some money to do it. And so it's kind of that start that little ball rolling, and eventually it'll pick up speed. I think that's just generally a good idea. In advocation, we advocate for what we care about, and in this particular case, I think it benefits all of us, and it's makes it for a healthier, I think, community and society generally. Plus, the bees do better, both honeybees
and on your local gardening Facebook page, you can be the voice that says fireweed isn't a weed, and that they shouldn't necessarily pull it.
It's one of the. It's a really nice native pet producer.
Leave it for us.
Peter and Amy, the Xerces Society that you were attending a meeting, is it here in the U.S.? Because there's a big one in the UK that I'm.
The Xerces Society it's headquartered in California. One of the co-founders lives on Whidbey Island. I'm remembering that right. Not
Just
a co-founder.
one of the guys that works for him is that works for the Xerces Society started Northwest Meadowscapes that's on Vashon. So we've heard him. He's spoken at the Flower and Garden Show before, and he's heading a lot of their research into hedgerows, and that's one of the big things they've been doing is sort of black tarping these large sections around big monocrop agriculture, and the amount of native pollinators that end up in the middle of that field is immense.
Well, and the reduction in pests.
And so then, and the reduction in pests, because when you have all the good bugs, so they're doing a lot of how can we, and then they can lower their pesticide use. So they're doing a lot of research on that, and then they do a ton of conservation. The thing we attended was for like cities of how can you be
more pollinator friendly.
Yeah, more pollinator friendly in your planting and your management. It's all sorts of things, and it's largely native pollinator.
It's definitely native focused.
They also have the Bee Something project that's like a certification that like blueberries and other like larger scale farmers can have. So they have a lot of different arms, but it's largely save our insects is the essence of the and we will be dead without them. So, however,
even though Einstein didn't say that,
but that is the summary of sort of the work that they do, and it's the most, I feel like, sort of scientific but also broad of any of the sort of bug conservation people.
We've enjoyed all of their presentations have been really, really great. They've been enjoyable and informational.
And there's a lot on their website.
They also have native pollinator seed mixes too. And I was just trying to look that up. I did just look it up. It's a really nice mix of natives. It does have milkweed in it, which is not native to the Puget Sound region, but it's a native seed mix for the Maritime Pacific Northwest.
So can you like maybe in the chat put up the link to their site?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, by the way, I just want to mention there's a fellow, I forget his name, Bob or Robert, in my neighborhood who's working with the Seattle Parks Department to revegetate a park. I live in Maple Leaf. And we have the Maple Leaf Reservoir. It was a park that was built on top of a reservoir, and anyway, it became overrun with invasive species. So he's a beekeeper, or used to be, and is now heading up a citizen program to reforest it or revegetate it with pollinator-friendly species of plants, native species. So yeah, lots of that kind of stuff. It's cool.
Yeah, and there's also grants available for larger projects too, both through King Conservation District and TILF and other things, if there are sort of community projects like that you see and are interested in helping make happen.
Hey, last question, and then I'll shut up for a little while. I read that the fungi guy, the fungi guy,
Stamets.
Stamets, thank you. Yeah. There's some fungi that are beneficial for bees. I was curious that he reported about, but hasn't actually described. So I was curious if you guys knew what those were.
I can sort of take that if no one from the
I think
board
the
wants to
talk
take
is
it.
available. You can.
We've had Paul Stamets, Fungi Perfecti, been working with Washington State University for a long time. Amy Beth's looking this up to see if she can find it. But they've been developing a strain of fungus that attacks varroa mites specifically. And I think they've also been developing just some general bee health fungi. But yeah, they're working on that with Washington State University. Wazoo has done presentations at PSBA many times, and one of the things that they usually include is an update on that particular, or on those projects that they're working on.
Well, and we had them come like last year or 2 years ago. Someone knows.
That's what I just
it is
said.
okay.
So hopefully we'll have Brandon back in the near future. I always enjoy his talks. Hint, hint, board.
Well, it's good to catch up on what they're doing research-wise, and
yes,
the Stamets work was just getting started, and it seemed like he just kind of could broadly brush it and talk about how research results are forthcoming, kind of thing, which will be really cool.
His new documentary was cool, if anyone.
Oh, Stamets?
Stamets, yeah.
There's a big documentary about him that's really good. It's very one with the mushroom, a little woo-woo, but it teaches you a lot about his view of mushrooms, and we learned a lot about mushrooms. I think it's great as it's a lot of scientists talking about how great he is as a like amateur scientist, and how much he's contributed as an amateur scientist, and
cool.
Yeah, sort of highlighting that was good.
Yeah, he's a kick. There's a it was 2019. Pollan came out with a book, Michael Pollan, that had a chapter of his interaction with Stamets that was quite entertaining. And they went into the forest, and they were going to eat magic mushrooms, but the forest ranger was there, and they were afraid. It's a good story. He's a character.
Paul Stamets wasn't very happy about that book.
Oh, really?
Gave away his stocks.
Oh, probably. Blew his cover.
Yeah.
I don't think he had much of a cover though.
Yeah. I mean, his hat is pretty is a dead giveaway. He has this like fedora made out of mushrooms.
Yeah. He's a character. They broke the mold when they made him.
Does anybody have any further questions, or should we go ahead and wrap it up?
I have one last question. Does anybody here have horizontal hives, or is everybody using Langstroth vertical style hives?
I've been keeping top bar hives along with Langstroth for quite, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years now. And I actually, the last few years, have had several survive. And of course, Jeff's the kind of the top bar dude.
Yeah, I have quite a few top bars. But...
In fact, are you still only doing top bar, Jeff?
Yeah, I only do top bars. I have about 30 different spots around the city.
Okay. Do you, so here's a question, this might be, just edifying for Todd here and anybody, but do you do any like treatments, like, organic treatments with, formic acid and anything like that. Because I've been doing the same types of treatments with my top bar hive as I have with my Langstroth hives, but I'm curious as to what your practices have been, because the mite seems to be pretty obviously our main problem.
Beyond brood breaks, I have tried the oxalic acid shop towel method on the floorboards. It kind of works.
Okay.
There isn't a good way to get the strips in there, or like the vapor doesn't work in a top bar. You need a vertical channel for that to rise up through. But yeah, I've tried that in the floorboards with some success. I think the biggest problem we have with the top bars is they're not a good honey hive, because you can't like rip the roof off their house and freak them out to make a lot of honey. But the problem is we have these hot, smoky summers, in August, July, so they don't get to really backfill that brood nest very well. And what I'm finding in the top bars is they're not wanting to leave where the brood was to move back into their honey in winter. So I end up doing a lot of manipulation to keep pushing that honey closer and closer as the brood nest shrinks. Where in previous years, when we didn't have these big fires every summer, it wasn't a problem. They could get plenty of nectar in August and September and backfill that brood nest area, so you have nice bands on all the bars. But last 3 years, I'm finding that those brood nest frames are pretty empty. Even with supplemental surf, they start from the back where the surf is, and they keep working forward, and you still don't get all that. You don't get the honey around the brood nest area where they are. So that's sort of been my challenge with that I don't think the Langstroth beekeepers have been, because you can do mountain camp really easy. It's really hard to do that without breaking the cluster up in a top bar hive.
Todd, I will say
I still do it. There's lots of other great advantages, but that's been one of my frustrations, is these summers are killing me. It's a lot more work.
I did top bars for half a dozen years along with Langstroth, and just because honey became more and more important to me, I kind of echo what Jeff is saying. It was the reason I stopped keeping top bar hives. But the thing that I loved about top bar hives, and I would see it side by side all the time, is the bees in the top bars always seemed like the calmest bees to me compared to my Langstroth hives.
I'm going to speak for Todd here for just a second. Sorry, Todd, because we talked earlier. He's using a very specific style of hive that is it's a horizontal hive, but it uses lay-in frames, so it's not a traditional top bar. I don't know if anyone has any experience with lay-in frames. I don't know anything really.
Are they square?
Yeah, so I'm following a guy by the name of Dr. Leo Sharaskin. His website is horizontalhive.com, and basically he's this Russian guy. He lives in Missouri, and he's advocating that first of all you capture native bees. And so I built a bunch of swarm catchers and placed them around my neighborhood to try to capture swarming bees, which I haven't caught them, but
Just so you know, there aren't native bees left.
Right. Yeah.
You have a beekeeper every other block, so you're going to get swarms, but you're going to get people's packages that are swarming.
Okay, that's what I think.
Probably loaded with a lot of mites too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what he's proposing though is that natural selection will eventually prevail, and that capture swarming bees that are surviving, that are locally adapted, and then provide them a home, etc. So that's part of the reason why I'm going with this. But the other reason is to try to increase habitat for bees, and honey. Getting honey is my secondary goal. My primary goal is to increase habitat and try to help the bees out, basically. Pretty naive, but that's fine.
I'm sure Tracy will echo this, that 5% of those queens that come from swarms are good. The rest is 95% is garbage, and I've taken to replacing all those queens I get in swarms now, because they're garbage queens. They're not worth it. They won't make it.
I do too. I kill them all.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, so we're not in the city. You're not getting good swarms.
No, they almost always die over the winter.
Okay, so I should take my storm catchers and put them out in the country. I have one in the country, so maybe I should put the rest out there.
Well, you can put them in town too. Hopefully you'll catch some,
Yeah,
but
just
just know
replace
that
the
you'll want to
queen.
replace the queen.
Get a queen from a good source.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Well, with that said, then I'm curious what you guys think, why, or the reason you think those queens are so poor.
They're the queens that come out of packages almost always.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I mean, they're not, it's not an old tree that's been apart for 10 years. It's someone's hive they haven't been watching, and it's a package from the current year usually. I've seen dots on a lot of them, and it's always new queens. I'm just like, oh, this is someone's new queen.
And I learned that the hard way because the swarms that I would catch, I would try to overwinter them, and they almost always die. And I swore after they almost all died the last time I wasn't going to do it anymore. And I just keep
I
my
haven't been
own
on the swarm
queens.
list for a long time, so I haven't really had to deal with that. But yeah, okay, like it makes sense now.
Yeah, you have to get a long ways from an urban area to get some good bees that maybe you might look out in West Seattle if you're by one of the big parks where you've got a wild nest still. But
Well,
I
I
think West
live.
Seattle's gotten
I live on a green belt, so I haven't had much trouble, but I don't catch a lot of swarms anymore either. In fact, I probably give away a lot of my own bees to people because I'm not on the swarm list and I may not be around when they fly out in my neighborhood. But, you know, what do you do?
The guy, Shirakin, he's actually out in rural Missouri, so that actually kind of makes sense that he's
Yeah. I see Sven has a question too.
Yes, and in fact, actually, it's kind of on this concept of swarming queens and replacing queens. I have two hives that are looking like they're going to survive the winter, and one of them was definitely showing signs of being undermated last year. So I was looking at replacing her. My problem is that I live out in the north end of Kirkland, and in terms of local apis population, I don't see a lot of honeybees in my neighborhood except for ones that I'm reasonably sure are mine. I know of 2, maybe 3 other beekeepers in 2 miles. Is there enough density for me to split and have a good mated queen, or should I just bite the bullet and order a new one?
In Kirkland, yes.
Okay.
You're surrounded by beekeepers. I mean, you may not see the bees, but the drones are there. The queens will find. She'll fly 3 miles if she needs to find a good drone. But the drones are there.
Well, plus the beekeepers out there usually have larger numbers of bees, so you might not know as many, but they might have a lot more. And Dave, you know, Dave's with Cascade Natural Honey. That's basically, I mean, it's a little bit further to the south where, well, I mean, I don't know where Kerry actually keeps his.
Yeah, he's probably about
specifically
5 miles south, 5 to 8 miles south of where I'm at.
Yeah, so I think your drone congregation areas will be just fine.
Okay. Thank you.
If in doubt, take some pheromone, take a balloon, and go to the park and see if you get a whole bunch of drones showing up. Helium balloon, of course. Yeah,
it's a fun experiment anyway. Evan Sugden did that experiment with one of his classes a couple of years ago, and I got to see the video of it, and it was pretty funny. Or I think he came and did a presentation at PSBA or something like that, but I digress.
I can't believe we've never done that. That's such a good idea as an activity.
Well, we have so much time on our hands. You know, I agree with you, Amy Beth. There's nothing else to do.
Get a balloon. You want it about 15 feet up. And find like a park or an open area, usually with low wind, so usually at the bottom of a hill. And maybe there's a tree line or something, but just a little grassy areas like that. And you know, if you have a virgin queen in a cage or some pheromone on there, you're going to get drones. If they're there, you'll see them.
Oh, I love this experiment.
Actually,
Kathy
that's not
did
a bad
it during
idea
one of her
for-
classes and got a great drone comment. She said it was awesome.
Nice.
Well, that's a good way to, if you're setting up a queen yard too, to kind of investigate where your DCAs are. If you want to walk about a half mile in either direction, I suppose. But
Well, net them and then mark them, and then just check your hives to see if any of those drones are marked with your color.
You know, the other thing that works great to figure out where your drone congregation areas might be is to use Google Earth and draw a 1.5 mile circle around your house. You can do a circumference right on there and then look for parks and intersections where there's a big open area like next to roads.
There's lots of those around me. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's a cool idea.
Raina, your hand's up too.
Yes. Actually, I was really interested in that Layens hive as well. I've seen it on YouTube, and couple of the things that I found interesting about them was the fact that you could take a Langstroth frame and convert it easily in the Layens hive, because the size, it's not deep enough, but it's wide enough that you could put them in there. And it also had more insulation for overwintering the hives. And so we thought about experimenting with maybe starting one up after we get our hives back up and going in the summer. So I would love to maybe get in touch with Todd G and find out how you're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put my email in the chat. I just put a link to my project. This summer I built a hugelkultur, and then also built 8 swarm catchers and 6 hives. So I have hives, but I don't have bees. But here's my email.
Well, I will have these. My hives died in January.
What one catches if you use regular deep frames in those is the bees will draw a drone comb on the bottom because the Layens frames are a lot deeper. So you might want to just invest in some Layens frames.
Oh, I was just thinking because we're starting 2 nukes again this year, and maybe after these get up and going, if I could buy a queen and then take some brood and move it over into the Layens hive and do kind of a split to it.
Sure.
And see how that works. In that case, I could start with the brood comb with the Langstroth frames, and then have everything else Layens, and then just replace it, build it up,
and just cut that drone comb out later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On that question, I was trying to figure out, I don't actually know what the size of the Langstroths are. I built a bunch of Layens frames, but I was trying to figure out whether I should buy a package or nukes, and I was sort of assuming that the Langstroth frames wouldn't fit in the Layens hive, because the Layens hive is a little narrower, I thought.
It looks like I'm
bring some
looking at
frames
the
over to
plan.
show you.
I'm looking at your plans, the plans on the site here. It looks like the length, these are really deep boxes. So you take a Langstroth deep or medium and you just turn it sideways, and then you have a little bit more gap if it's depending on what, if it was a deep or a medium, but they're really just Langstroths turned on their sides. So if you want to convert them, looks like that's how he's doing it.
Okay. So I could get nukes then, and instead of packages, and put them on their side and put them into my.
Well, you wouldn't be able to use the comb because the comb is built at an 18-degree up angle to keep the honey in. So you'd have to use an empty one so that they built the comb sideways.
That's not a detail he covers here, but yes, he's doing it wrong, because you can see it in the picture where he just took a nuke frame and turned it sideways.
Yeah, that
yeah, you are disrupting their natural orientation that they're building comb, so it's angled.
I think I'll stick with the package then and just go that route.
Yeah, okay, good idea. Or start with a nuke, and then what you can do is put if the frames are long enough, I don't know how wide they are. If they'll hang in there, then they'll just build drone comb down on the bottom, and then you just take those out over time.
The hive is too narrow, Tracy.
Is it? Okay.
I was looking at that. Yeah. It's.
So I mean, is it 13 by 16? Is that right? Are those kind of the typical dimensions?
They're
13 inches by 16 inches.
I think what I was reading was it was 15 and 16 inches tall, and then with the ears, it's 14 inches wide. Without the ears, it's 12 inches wide. Does that sound right, Todd?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A Langstroth's about 19, what, a quarter inches or something like that in length. So that would definitely either need to be cut down or something.
These are really big frames.
Yeah, they're super tall.
I mean, they're going to be heavy when they're full honey. But,
Don't discourage me.
yeah.
I've already built hundreds of these frames.
Well, you will have the
I
color
wanted to hear updates from him. I want to hear how it goes.
We
Yeah,
expect
you better make
updates
sure the
weekly.
tops are very well connected, because otherwise when you try and lift them off, you're just going to bring the top off and not the whole frame.
True.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, on a hot day, I would not turn them at all. Because it's going to be hard, like when in top bar, you pull it up and you can rotate it around really easy. These things are big. I mean, you're going to have to like bring it up, set it on something, and then walk around and look at the other side.
Well, you'll get all your steps in, Jeff.
Yeah, or you have really long arms, you know, I don't know, but
With gigantic shoulder muscles, deltoids,
Right.
and traps to, hold everything up.
Jeff, it's one of the things I always appreciate at the bee meetings is like, yeah, you can talk to the top bar person, Jeff, but he's going to also encourage you to not start with the top bar. Though we find ours is sitting out here and we're finally going to put bees in it this year. We've had it for like 3 years and this is going to be the year. 4 years.
Maybe 5.
I try to be realistic, you know, it's like, because top bar gets a bad rap, and it's usually because there's a lot of things that it's really easy to mess up. So I try to like hear all the bad things and hear all the good things, make your decision. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times it's just in winter, you know, I'm just like, I wish I could do mountain camp because it's so easy just to throw a shim up there with dry sugar, and it works so beautifully.
It is.
You
It
don't have any
does.
equivalent to that in top bar.
That's why I always laugh when I see all the recipes for making candy boards. I'm like, people, you like to work hard instead of work smart. Why are you spending all that time making candy boards?
They'll eat the dry sugar. Just
Good
give them the dry
lord.
sugar.
Stop it in.
My first year, I killed my bees with my candy board, and this year they've already eaten through one thing of mountain camp, and I've replaced it. But they're both heavy bees still.
Good.
Good.
Good news. That's how I like them.
You're winning at beekeeping.
For first year I didn't. This year it looks like I'm good. Last year it looks like I did good.
Hey. Oh, yeah, I think there's nobody here who can say they've had a perfect run.
Something interesting with our hive survival this year, because we have a lot of different neighborhoods, is there was one neighborhood that we had pretty high die out rate already. And it feels like our best guess is that there were a lot of new beekeepers, brand new, like in that area, that didn't treat for mites, and they all got bombed because, I mean, we were dealing with everything the same. Their mites were all the same, and that neighborhood just tanked.
That's sad.
I've heard a lot of that
It
too.
happens. I see that in Queen Anne all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't pay enough attention to mite immigration in, September and October, unfortunately.
It can happen in 10 days, as hives crash around you, and then you get an influx of like the worst of the worst mites are carrying all the diseases, and they just start chewing up your bees.
Yeah.
You've got, I always tell people, it's like you're trapped in a room and I'm going to release a jar full of mosquitoes and they all have malaria, Zika, and West Nile, good luck.
Yeah, that's a really rosy picture you're painting there, Jeff.
I know.
Yeah,
I like that one, Jeff. I'm going to steal that. Hope you don't mind.
I thought you were going to say COVID.
How about nobody's
Mosquitoes
talked
don't
about
spread COVID.
Nobody's talked about the murder hornets yet.
Sorry, what did you say, Todd?
Nobody's talked about the murder hornets yet. Like, what's the?
There's nothing to talk about yet. They're still up on the border.
Something we talk about a lot related to sort of mites and new beekeepers, though, is we feel like there's a marked difference in the last 5 years of new beekeepers coming in proactively knowing. Like, I always ask, how are you going to treat for mites, not if, when people are talking about buying bees. And people have answers a lot more and have plans, and it feels like there's some momentum there for new hobbyists that is different than when Peter started and a lot of people started, that we didn't meet anyone for like 3 or 4 years who wasn't like, I'm going to save all of bees. I'm not going to treat. I am going to fix them all. Great. That's how a lot of us started.
I think Jeff stuck with that.
Well, Jeff and Peter can definitely vouch that I was one of those people. You know, I was, you know, treatment free, and I did really, really well until I got more than 8 hives. In about the third or fourth year, all of a sudden I started losing a lot of bees, and then one year I lost them all, and that was 2015. That was the year that I had my little come to Jesus, and that's when I started treating, and I've had better luck. I still lose quite a few, sometimes depending, but mostly it's the diligence. And I think who was it that said, somebody said it earlier, maybe it was Dave, but somebody said that you have to be almost oh no, it was Kevin, I think. You have to be kind of a little bit, you know, anally retentive about it, and just be obsessed with treating and making sure that you keep those loads down. Otherwise, it'll look fine. Peter.
Or testing.
I was going to say, diligent with testing. If they don't have mites or their mite levels are really low, you don't need to treat them.
Yeah. But for this, just to slightly expand, for any other new beekeepers, to slightly expand on
still stuck
Jeff's
on this
thing. I'm sorry that you're still listening to us, but even if you have a 100% perfect mite-resistant, mite-proof, bulletproof bee that, you know, can completely control its mites on its own, if you're keeping bees in Seattle, you're surrounded, or any urban area in the country, basically, you're surrounded by a ton of people who do not have perfect mite-resistant, mite-proof, bulletproof bees. And they are all producing lots and lots of mites that are carrying all of the, as Jeff said, worst bee diseases. And their hives are going to die. And all of those mites are going to come clobber your hive that was mite-proof and bulletproof. But it can't, if you've got a 5%, 3 to 5% infestation suddenly appearing in your hive, they can't deal with that. There's no possible way for them to deal with that on their own. So that's why Amy Beth earlier was talking about when, you know, all of us who keep bees in the city, we're one massive apiary. The bees are close together. We share our mites, we share our diseases. When we all take care of our bees, we all do well. When people don't take care of their bees, you know, we all suffer for it. So,
does Danny have a new Mite Busters calendar for this year? Has anyone seen that yet? No. For when those treat weeks are? Yeah.
No, I got a calendar from Green River College, but I was hoping I was all excited, but.
Someone says in chat he does not. Okay.
Yeah, no, I was going to say also with that, you know, a lot of people we talk to here, just due to selection bias, is going to be probably far more informed. There's probably is an equal number of people that aren't coming to meetings or in Facebook groups or in places that are winging it much more. And I think those people are out there, and we have to accept it's probably not us, you know, likely people that are here are reaching out and trying to learn more. But I think that there's a lot of people that do kind of like, oh, this could be a fun hobby, and then put some bees in a box and walk away.
And Anna, my hypothesis for last year was that we had a whole lot more of those people who were like, hey, it'll be a fun quarantine hobby. And more people than usual, because, you know, you're stuck at home. What are you going to do? I'm going to keep bees. It'll be great. It'll be fun. I don't have to do anything, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
you would
and-
be surprised how many maybe I shouldn't say bee, how many bee havers there are in the city. Like every other block, there's probably a hive, at least one. There are a lot of hives out there.
I had the worst mite bombs this year that I've had so far. So I was testing at the end, or in October, and even then would get mite bombs. So I was glad that I was checking so diligently this year, and I saw hives that looked great 2 weeks later were almost dead, from other people's hives. So it was really, really exaggerated this year from what I've seen in years past. Or this last year.
Is there a significant difference in how you treat if you have a horizontal hive versus a vertical hive for mites? I mean, what's the
With a strip product?
For horizontal hives?
Yeah,
Or-
just something like a strip that you can pin between the bars and it can hang. That like vapor doesn't work. It can't dissipate because you just have a wall of comb. It doesn't spread out very well.
Have you ever tried the dribble, Jeff?
Which one?
The dribble method?
No, you can't because it's solid. It's a top, so you'd have to open each frame, dribble a little bit, open a frame, dribble a little bit. You have to. The dribble is so nice on a length stop. You just dribble it, and you're done. You close it back up. Topper, you have to go through the whole thing.
With Lance frames, I think that would be a more standard treatment method. As far as I think you could do an oxalic dribble on that because there's space between the frames, based on what I saw on them. I think I didn't look at what kind of lid they have on them, but I bet you could figure out a way to use like a Formic strip of some sort, or a Thymol, Appolife VAR or Apigard, the Thymol treatments. I bet you could find a way to use those in yours. Just because it is kind of a hybrid setup, it seems like, between a Langstroth and a top bar. But yeah, the strips.
Yep. The only challenge with that, Peter, though, is like the top bar with Thymol, you wouldn't want to use that with your honey comb in there because it makes everything taste like Listerine.
Yeah,
so
there's that.
you'd have to
you'd
only
have
use
fresh
that
brush.
after you'd have to like rotate the comb out.
Yeah.
We know it's getting late because all our plant lights are turning off in our living room.
It gets darker and darker.
Okay, well, should we wrap it up then? It's about 9. On to next week, or till next month, I suppose.
Yeah. It's been fun talking to everyone. Have a great month.
Isn't it good?
Good
It
to see
soothes
you.
the soul.
It does.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Good night,
everyone. I hope we get snow tonight.
Ah,
I hope we don't.
There's always one.
Tomorrow.
It's so fun to wake up to snow in the morning.
Yay!